to order the board meeting, 6:30, January 24th. Any public input? Still? Okay. Item number 3, Finance Committee recommendation. George?
Yes, Finance Committee has really 2 recommendations at their meeting on Tuesday, January 2019. The Finance Committee passed a motion for the committee to recommend approval of the proposed 2019-2020 capital budget, 2019 operations and maintenance budget. The operations and maintenance budget amount is $8,535,980. That's $8,535,980. And the capital budget comes to a total of $10,950,000 even. So that's the recommendation from the Finance Committee to the Board of Directors for their consideration and approval.
Would you like to make a motion to that effect?
Sure. I move that the Board of Directors approve the information I just presented. The operation management budget of $8,535,980 and the capital budget of $10,950,000 for the fiscal year 2019-2020.
Is there a second?
10 million.
10 million,
10 million, not 10,000.
$10,950,000.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Any discussion? Joe, we have to show a show of hands on this?
Yeah, I would have everybody vote.
All right. All those in favor signify by raising their hands. Unanimous? Okay. George, you still have the floor?
Right, and at another meeting of the Finance Committee on January 18, 2019, the Finance Committee passed a motion with recommendation that the rate increase of 4.5% be considered by the Board of Directors at their meeting today.
What's your motion?
I move that we approve a 4.5% rate increase.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes. I was the odd man out on the Finance Committee. I thought we should be a little more conservative in the rate increase because of the effect on the customers. And I had hoped we'd do a 4% increase. For many of the reasons that have been expressed in the past. I think the 4% increase would still keep us within the guidelines of the work that needs to be done. It have not a great impact on the consumer. And I know it's the difference between 4 and 4.5% isn't a lot of money when you look at it on a monthly basis, but there's still a perception of making a big jump, I think. And so we haven't had much discussion as far as input from the customers at this point on a rate increase. I still think in the long term, if we do a long, steady increase based on the work that we expect, capital projects that we expect to get done, I still think we can stay within the guidelines of keeping it, let's say, at a reasonable rate anyway. So that was my input to the Finance Committee, and that's what I'd like people to think about if they want to vote on the increase. That's all I have.
Can I ask Pam, I don't have those figures with me, but we have, what was our projected increase for this year? Like 4 or 5 years ago when we started with this program?
4% per year.
4%.
And actually the last 3 years we did 3.25%.
Okay.
I guess a question or a request. I do support that level of increase, but I'd like to hear a little bit of the rationale behind that level rather than something else.
Well, like everybody here, I've looked at all the numbers, and the numbers can take some time to go over. But I simply look at it this way. We now have an interest rate, or have been for the last year, at 3.25%. And if we look at it that way and think of the additional amounts we need to support what Pam just presented, it might all come to 1.25%. So if we add the 3.25 to the 1.25 or 4.5, you know, I can't sit here and say, is the 1.25 additional increment the exact perfect number? I can't do that, but I think it's a reasonable number. And for that reason, you know, the finance committee, or I am behind the 4.5% increase. And I think it's the type of increase we really need to make sure we have the funds to continue through with the Pawtucket pipeline. And I think everybody here agrees that's a critical project to be done.
My input was I would have voted in favor of a higher increase because of the capital expenditures we're facing and the fact that costs are increasing very rapidly. So spending, you know, 6 to 8% today ultimately is going to cost the ratepayers less than if we delay these increases and stretch them out over a period of time. You know, we have an old infrastructure that was neglected for years. We devoted our resources to the new pipeline over the bay, and we're paying the price for underinvestment.
I agree with Gina's comments, but I also want to mention that nobody likes a rate increase at all. I think if you ask any person on the street, and I've had people who come up to me and say, oh, so you're on Bristol County Water Authority, and they talk about rate increases. But the reality is costs go up, and we have to make sure that we are providing for enough money in the budget to get the projects that we have outlined done. We have a lot of work to do, and we've got to get that done. Now, I looked at all the information that was provided, and there was the cumulative rate history of 1985 to present was interesting, and I'm sure there's lots of facts and factoids behind all of this, but I noticed there was a 3-year period where there was a 3% increase. There was a 2-year period where there was a 3% increase, and those seem suspiciously low, actually, and maybe based on a sentiment of let's just keep it at 3%. But after those periods of time, there was a huge increase, 9% one time and 11% another time. And I've been with an agency, I went to an agency that hadn't had a rate increase in 11 years. And they had, when I got there, we went through the books and we realized we had to have a 25% increase. And the response at the public hearings were, if you had kept the rate reasonable over the years and raised it a little bit, we wouldn't be sitting here looking at a 25% increase. So I think we have to keep in mind that, as Gina was saying, and I certainly appreciate what you're also pointing out. But I also, and I said at the last meeting, I'll probably correct the minutes a little bit in a moment when we get to that, is that I'm concerned about all those miles of pipeline that we have to replace or repair over the next 50 years. And I keep thinking that we really should have a much more accelerated program to get those repaired much quicker than a lifetime for all of us. And that would require additional funding. And I don't want to raise rates, but the reality is we have a lot of work to do and there's a lot of challenges out there. And so this doesn't mean that we're giving carte blanche to the administration to say spend every dollar we have. Where the board is still going to look at how spending is done throughout the year, and we're still going to put things out to competitive bid and so forth. So I think we have a bunch of possibilities here of saving money, being within budget, and maybe even expanding some programs. And so I appreciate everything everybody's saying. I worry about we're not doing things fast enough in one particular area. we're moving on some other projects that are definitely a huge priority for the organization. And I'm glad we're doing that.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments?
I understand the scope of all the work we're doing and what we've been doing and what we projected, and I think the ratepayers basically have a good idea. That's why they don't come and really give us a hard time. But I think we ought to show them a little bit of thought, not just take, bang, this is the figure that we're throwing out and we're going to adopt it. And I feel confident we can do what we set out to do and still get it done, and with like a 4% raise. So I can support a 4% raise.
But I don't want to leave the impression that a number is just being thrown out. If it is, I would...
No, I didn't.
Okay. Because in reading
But
the
a
documents...
lot of the public may think that.
Yeah.
They're going to say, oh, they did
and
one figure and that was it. They didn't
And I think when Gina brings up that we need better communications with the public, I think we certainly do.
Well, that's another discussion.
Right, that's another discussion. And but what it does come back to is that if whatever we do, we have to make sure the public is supporting them. And the way you get them to support them is by communicating why they're necessary, and then why they cost as much as they do, and why you have to pay that much money. And so it is all tied together. So
I don't think there's any harm in showing them that we think a little bit about their pocketbook too.
I think they're thinking of their pocketbooks. And the impact analysis that was shown in here, to me, seems affordable.
As I recall, the difference between 4% and 4.5% was less than $2.50 a month. I don't know about you, but I go to Dunkin' Donuts in the morning and I get my coffee and it costs me $3.63.
As I said, I do support the 4.5%. I wanted to see on the record a rationale to support it, which we now have in terms of it's not a number out of the air, but it is reasoned and is intended to achieve the objectives over time.
I think there's another important consideration to it, and Pam addressed it. The financing, I believe that the water company was looking forward to do this year isn't going to happen, and Pam could discuss that. So it becomes important for the water company to build up the reserves. And the reserves are necessary and probably can save the organization money over a period of time. It gives the management more flexibility, and it seems imperative that the two main priorities be accomplished: to replace the infrastructure and to get the backup. I'm very aware that nobody likes to see an increase, but I think a lot of people would be comfortable with this, knowing what we're going to do with the increase. I think they would be if they're well communicated with that information. And so I don't necessarily see that as a problem. Some people won't be, but tonight we have one gentleman here to express thoughts about a possible 4.5% increase, and so far nobody from the public has come here. So I really wonder, there's no fact in front of us that indicate it's going to be a big problem with the public. That's the way I see it. I'm just looking at the facts.
Any additional comments?
I'd like to hear from anyone else. We do have to realize that the vote that we need to take, it's going to be at least 6. I think we need 6 people, right?
Yes.
So we may end up in.
George touched on an excellent point where we presume or assume to know what the ratepayers are feeling anytime we attach a rate increase and what the percentage is. And I think the fact that the 3 town councils have been supporting us tremendously in the last 3 years. I think the ratepayers can see what we're doing and why we're doing it, by the lack of confidence that they have in us. There's not an outcry in any newspaper or here in person saying you're throwing our money away. You're spending it foolishly and needlessly. You're buying trucks, you're doing this, you're doing that. So I feel confident in supporting this increase because it needs to start somewhere, where we take a look at the budget, take a look at what we need to spend to get the job done that we want to get done, and yet how are we going to fund it? How are we going to pay for it?
Let me say this. I am not hard line on 4%, believe me.
Okay.
And everybody made it. Actually, all the points are very relative and they make sense. And I agree that you do have to build the church. And because I'm concerned with a deadlock here, I'll have to tell you right now, I will be flexible on the vote.
Okay.
I'd rather not see us get into a deadlock.
Okay. If there's no other comments, all those in favor of a rate increase recommended by the finance company of 4.5%, please raise their hand.
I'm going to vote for you.
Then I'll vote for it too. I'll make it there.
Passed unanimously. Thank you, George.
Yes.
The next motion has to be with that rate increase approved, to also approve these,
Fee schedule.
the fee schedule.
Okay.
Move to approve the fee schedule as presented.
Second. Any discussion? All those, raise your hand. I'm sorry, George.
It's my understanding that the fee schedule will be increased at the same percentage as the rate increase. Pam, could you please comment on that? Am I correct on that?
Well, the fee schedule includes the actual rates for water service, but it also includes miscellaneous fees, which are, as I mentioned, installation of services, turn on, turn off of water. It's replacement of a meter that was frozen,
So then,
engineering fees.
so the increase then would just apply to the items that we see as ratepayers on our bill?
No, the fee schedule is
There's
different
a
from the
fee
rate.
schedule, actually,
okay.
in your packet, it's a number of pages,
So
about,
it's the fee schedule in your package, and in that fee schedule, certain fees and charges, there's a notation that says to be adjusted by the rate increase passed by the board tonight. So what you would be doing is approving this fee schedule, which will then be, certain fees will be adjusted based on the vote that you just took for the 4.5%.
Okay.
I'm just on it says new rate schedule. So like the meter sales and whatnot and customer service charges, is
Yes.
that a fee or is that part of the rate increase? I just.
well, the first 2 pages are
The
essentially
meter sales, it says
rates,
to be adjusted
and
by,
those will be adjusted per the rate increase.
so is our motion including metered sales and customer service charges too? Or is that included in the rate?
That's already included.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
What it's not including in the rate, increase in rates, are the additional language changes and the additional fees that have been adjusted to represent our most recent actual cost.
So the items where we have a red,
Yes, those get
Notation
automatically adjusted
are
based on whatever the rate increase is.
so our motion is relative to everything else?
Yes.
None of these. I just wanted to.
It's stated here, but I just want to make sure. So these rates go into effect March 1st.
Yes.
So the first billing after March 1st would be when, I guess? It's for usage after March 1st.
It's usage after March
Okay.
1st, so the bills would be, so if you get your meter read in March, your bill would only reflect the increase
From March 1st.
from March 1st.
Okay. Now, to put these rates into effect, is there a time, a legally required time frame between the time they're adopted and they get put into effect?
No.
Okay, because where I'm going on this, I don't want to throw I actually have an issue with the rate structure itself for metered sales. And I don't think we can resolve it in the month between now and when this would go into effect, but it's something that I think we need to look at. And I believe you have a declining block rate structure.
It's incline and then declines
It-
for
right,
large, super
right.
large users.
The
There,
first-
which are, I don't
it-
think we even have any
It
anymore.
increases from the first to the second, and then after that it drops in half to the largest user. And I think that's pretty archaic, actually, in rate structures. And I know that this has been in place for maybe 15 years that I've seen Bristol County Water Authority rates. And I think it's time that be changed, but
Well, we
I
have,
think it requires a much more study than saying, let's just change it. So I pointed out that I think this is something that needs to be looked at.
we
Actually,
did look at that in a rate study that was done a few years ago. And we decided we were gonna change the rates structure once
Yeah,
we went to monthly billing.
Right.
But then the meter system was set up such that monthly billing would have been very, very difficult. So then it got put off until now that the meters are replaced, then we want to go to monthly billing. And then we can take another look at,
So-
meanwhile, actually, I was recommending that we do another rate study this year,
Okay, so,
because we've also gotten, we need to take a look at our percentage of what we charge for fixed rate versus the usage rate.
right. And one of
That's
the-
gotten a little changed over the years as well.
But
And one of the
to
things
Ron's
about-
point, nothing I've heard you say addresses the issue of the precipitous drop in what we charge for large users. I think you said we don't have anybody who falls into that category. Is that correct?
Unless it's just Roger Williams.
Roger
perhaps.
Williams. There were some big, like Blount, I think it was at one time when they were operating. But and I think part of it was to help the commercial industrial accounts that we had at the time when this structure was set up.
But actually, I just want to say, this was based on cost of service. We were required to charge rates based on what it costs us to provide that water to an individual customer. This type of rate system was set up because large customers actually cost much less to serve. They incur all of the base costs, but they don't incur the demand, the fluctuating demand cost that actually residential customers are more subject to. So this is, I've dealt with this in other systems as well. It was, rather than setting up individual rates for a variety of different customers, it was kind of done as an all-in-one package. Times have changed. We don't have that many anymore, maybe just the one that's left where we could look at adjusting that structure.
But I haven't heard you say anything about why it has to be connected to monthly metering. There doesn't seem to be any logic to that.
As far as the structure, we need to do a study. We need to, things have changed since the last time we did a study. We need to have a cost of service study done that looks at the various classifications of customers, our residential and our commercial, basically.
We last did that 2 years ago?
No, that was done about 4 years ago.
And do we do that internally, or do we hire a consultant?
No, we hire a consultant for that.
And I'm willing to wait for that consultant to do the work. I'll just say again, this is very peculiar with regard to rate structures.
It's an old structure.
It's an old, outdated method of doing things. And I can appreciate what you're saying about the cost of service and the cost of treatment and all that kind of stuff. But this is really a peculiar one. It always stood out from all of the other systems in Rhode Island. Even other ones who had declining block rates, they all went to increasing block rates. And I don't know if there's any that have something that does this mountain type.
I think most now have gone to either a single rate
Right,
or
yeah.
just a one block inclining rate to
Right.
encourage conservation.
Right. This is unique.
I just have a similar observation. For the first time since we've lived here, we moved here 12 years ago, I sat down yesterday to calculate the rate on our invoice to see if I could come up with the same number. And I came up with the same number. But in doing that, I noticed the 3.5 and the 9.9, the 7.5 and the 3.5 and the 4.5, and I thought, wow. And the first thing that popped in my mind, why don't we just have a blended rate for 90% of the users? And I would imagine most people probably fall on tier 1 or tier 2 or combination, so. So it just struck me as unusual, just to give some additional input.
Any other comments before we vote?
Can I bring this back a little bit?
Yes, go ahead.
So what you're voting on is to approve the new rate schedule that was in the board package, marked draft. You're going to approve that. The only adjustment that's going to be made to this fee schedule is to account for the 4.5% increase that you passed tonight.
Okay.
Otherwise, you're approving this with your vote. Okay?
Any other discussions? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, passed unanimous. Thank you very much. Item 4 is minutes. 12/19 board meeting.
Move the exception to the minute. That's
Want to
second.
do a change?
Yeah, I'll wait for a second.
Any changes? Any votes? Nothing? All those in favor, say aye. Next is the 12/19 executive session. Fast. I ran into a problem with this previously because we're on in the open hearing part. I'll simply say in generality, the sentence with respect to number 1.
Why don't we address that in executive session?
Are we going to postpone the minutes until then?
Yes.
Then, okay.
Any recommendation?
We're down to the minutes.
Motion? Motion to approve. Second?
No, he's gonna postpone.
No,
Are you gonna postpone?
postpone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All of them were just executive session.
Just executive session.
Yeah, so you can approve the other ones,
Okay.
the table, the executive session.
We have a motion and a second? Make the motion.
I'll second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. How do you collect the minutes, copies of the
They're
minutes?
going to have to come back out again.
Do we keep them until?
Yeah, keep them until we go through that.
Okay, we have the board minutes from Tuesday, actually, Finance Committee meeting on January 8th. George? Finance Committee meeting minutes of January 8th.
You're just looking for a motion to, for them to be approved. Make a motion that the minutes of that meeting be approved.
I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Number 5, Executive Director's Report. Okay.
Okay, as I mentioned earlier, our averages are still below that of last year, even though we had an excellent summer. Being back to normal weather, we're back to typical usage. To go quickly through the elevator project, we did have the company come through. We haven't gotten the reports yet, so hopefully by next month. Pawtucket Pipeline, we've been continuing to work on whatever we can get done without going too far without the a meeting with the East Providence mayor. As I mentioned, he is forming a new government, but I happen to know the person he just appointed is their operations director, so hopefully we'll get him in.
Good.
We signed up for the Code Red system for customer notification in emergencies. It also allows us to provide text messages for information, general information, but we have to have customer permission in order to do that. So we're in the process of developing a program on collecting phone numbers that so people will accept text messages.
I'll give you my number now.
We don't answer those calls.
Just a text saying if there's something happening with the water system.
Oh, we wanted to do that 10 years ago when the town's backed up. We were gonna do it all together.
The towns did it, but
Yeah, they did it.
we were not included.
No, well, we were gonna do it all together, and then they backed out, and then they did it after we
Yep.
said no.
So at least we have a mechanism for
But the
emergency.
school departments had it or something.
And they do as well, yeah. And the meter installation project, we're about 41% complete. I think once especially once we hit spring, things will pick up quite a bit, especially as the installers finding and having a much easier time in Bristol, getting into facilities because they're more owner occupied rather than with renters. And he's, I know, expecting at Barrington for that reason will be very quick as well. So he's expected to finish up by this fall.
Yeah, I had a question on this. You mentioned about the galvanized pipe and its possible deterioration. Are we notifying customers before they get into changing the meters that if we find that they have galvanized pipe, do we let them know ahead of time before we're going to change the meter in case something happens? If it's susceptible to breakage, we've had problems before.
Whose responsibility
Yeah,
is it,
but-
is my question.
Actually, we've addressed this with the installer. And Ken can speak more to it if you
Yeah,
want.
we've coordinated with the contractor. When we set the appointment with the customer sets the appointment, the technician goes out to the property, he reviews the situation. If it's poorly corroded, there's pretty much to walk away from it at that point in time, because we don't want to create that. What we've done is we've gone out, and if we find some that are okay, because when we do that, then the obligation then is on the property owner to replace the plumbing, which is good. We don't want to just randomly just say we don't want to do it, we don't want to do it. So they go out and they make their best judgment. They do a lot of this. You know, most of the technicians have been working for a number of years. If there's a question that it looks pretty good, but it might be shaky, he coordinates with our staff. We go out prior to, we locate the curb stop, so that if something does happen, it gets shut off right away. But it's been minimal. We've had few, but what we don't want to do is the customer takes the time to make the appointment is there. We don't want to walk away from it and inconvenience the customer if they take the time out of work. So they'll use their best judgment, and it's worked out pretty well at this point in time.
So the system, so it's evaluated before they actually do the work.
Oh, yes.
Which is important.
Right, because from our standpoint, and it goes to some of the comments in Pam, this time of year, we don't want someone in the house to do a meter change and break the pipe, and we then are outside and we have 2 feet of ice snow packed on top of the curb stop, and it takes us 2 hours. So they're a little more sensitive now, and so Pam notes, they'll walk away from more now than they will in the springtime, you know, for that purpose.
But in any case, if the pipe breaks or is badly corroded and needs to be replaced, that is at the cost of the owner.
The homeowner, the issue of property owners have to maintain plumbing in good workable conditions so that we can take the meter on and off.
It's the line from the meter out to the street.
Out to the curb stop. Yeah. Sometimes it's also internal plumbing issue on the inside of the meter, and you will find, and the technicians are trained, people will use black iron gas pipe, and they'll screw it onto brass or galvanized, which, you know, if they don't have a licensed plumber do it, that can happen sometimes, and that itself accelerates corrosion. So they'll look at that whole assembly before they work on it.
Do you have any idea how many customers have the insurance program policy?
Not
We do.
often. We do,
I
we
can
get a
find that, but
report.
it's a growing number,
Yeah.
which is, you know, when you look at it for the cost, particularly I advise people, if you have a house with a new copper service or it's been built in 20, 30 years, I wouldn't get too nervous. But if I have an older house, you look at the cost of it over a 10-year period, it's still less than a third of what it would cost you to replace the service.
Right.
You know, if you had to pay cash out of your pocket.
Yeah.
So
I
it's-
have the insurance, and I have it in a property I have in Pawtucket. And I had Pawtucket Water Supply Board come out because I had this leaky connection in my basement. And they came out and they said, you need your line replaced. Do you have the insurance program? I said, I do. And it cost me absolutely zero. And they did it like within 2 days. It was very great, a good experience. So anybody ever asked me, I said, get the insurance.
Yeah, the customers that we've had, and we've had a few, not many, but we've had a few that have had failures, that have the same opinion with the company. It's quick, boom, boom, and they
No
very
hassle.
cooperative.
Well, I know the letters are still going out, because I got one not too long ago. And I have personally been asked by maybe 3 people, and I pretty much told them what you said, Ken, that you have to evaluate your system, how old is your house, is it possible that it has a galvanized pipe, and if it does, you really want to think about, you might want to get it. And I try to emphasize the fact that the Water Authority does not have anything to do with that, we only vet the company to make sure it's a reliable company.
Yeah. People will get notices from competing companies who have a different perspectives. That's why you have to be careful. They're not all the same.
Especially, we did put out a bid for this, and we made sure that they covered a number of different situations as well.
Anything else, PM, on the report?
Pump station.
Nope, just the demo of Metacom will probably pick up in another week or so, once the weather is more accommodating.
We didn't have any cold weather concerns?
We had about 3 breaks.
Did we?
Yeah.
I had a question. All that work at the bottom of Wood Street in Lyle, a week ago or so, there was somebody, it looked like they were doing test borings. Anybody know what they were doing there? After everything was
Oh,
done, and
yes.
supposedly there.
Yes.
The town was doing some soil exploration. The nature of what occurred out there with the water main breaks and then the problem with the sewer line a little bit. They were looking at whether or not work on the street, prior work on the street, had destabilized the soils. A little complicated because that's a tidal area.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So something happened where things shifted, and they're trying to look at whether or not it's okay now after all the work is
The town was doing that?
Excuse me?
The town was doing that?
The town was doing the.
Oh, I was just curious,
Their
I know I
consultants
saw it
were out
there.
as a concern, because if they determine it's fine, then we're okay. If not, then they want to make sure it's stabilized so they don't have enough time.
Just a question.
And just suggested, Sue, if you want to just give a quick update on our projects for this year.
Yeah, we're in preliminary stages of designing, getting together plans and specifications for the 2019 water main renewals. At the moment, I think we have about 6,000 feet, a little over a mile of mains that spread out. Right now, the streets are in Barrington and in Bristol for the most part. In my report, I think I listed the streets. Several of them are replacing 2-inch cast iron mains that are causing water quality complaints, obviously in those areas. And a couple also that are connecting some dead ends. So we're...
Are those being replaced with 2-inch new mains or bigger mains?
One case we're going for a bigger main because we want to increase the flow. One section in Barrington that's over near the East Providence line, we're trying to strengthen the system with larger mains. In another area, the 2-inch mains really are only serving one small street, so we're replacing with plastic, 2-inch plastic, as opposed to going to a bigger ductile iron pipe. So we do plan to do the design in-house for those. We're hoping to do that in the next month so that we can bid the project in March and hopefully be ready either for March or April to have you be awarding to a contractor. So that's the goal for that. And obviously there was no shortage of streets to pick from to renew. The problem is just paring it down to what we can afford to do. So as we're designing, we're also refining the cost estimate and might have to delete streets if we don't find that we have the money. So that's...
It's nice to see that you're replacing all the cast iron mains. Somebody commented on that earlier.
Yes.
Okay, financial report. Excuse me, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't know where to put this in the agenda, but, so I'll put it under executive director's report. This was a big package.
Yeah.
This was a huge package. Did you try to pick double-sided copies?
We did.
So I noticed there's some that are, but, you know.
The issue was the copy machine.
Yeah, I know.
For the amount of volume we had, it would have taken a few days to get it all printed with double-sided. It just goes very slow on double.
Having been on Bristol Recycling Committee, I feel I have to say something.
It initially was set up to all be double, but then we ran into some problems.
It's heavy. Don't get it over. It's up to carry.
Don't worry, they'll all blow down Hope Street.
Yeah, I know.
Mr. Monk.
Good evening. I emailed out the December reports a week or so ago, and they're also included in your booklets. No surprises. You know, basically we've seen, as Pam had mentioned, a slight decline. We're easing of the robust year we've had up through the summer. We had a very strong summer. We were running, I think, on the accrual basis about 7% ahead of last year. And that's now leveled off quite a bit, with the slope, the fall's kind of probably running a little under, and so we're in the 4% or something like that increase. So every year's a little different. You don't know what's going to happen there, but the dollars billed and gallons delivered charts on page 9 showed an increase of 5.35% and 2.98%. So the dollars are up 5%, the gallons are up almost 3% for the first 10 months. And that's on billings. On accrual, it's a little different. The accrual billing is basically taking into account what's unbilled, as we only do quarterly, so there's always basically 2.5 months that's not billed. So those accruals are reversed. We estimate how much is not billed on the true accrual basis. And on that basis, for December, we were 3.1% under last year, but for the year-to-date, we're increase of 4.1. So we've gone down from that 7 down to that 4. Expenses for December, 0.8% less than last year. Year-to-date, an increase of 5.3%. And a lot of that is the increases that we, in the funding of the pension plan. We raised it more than the budget to hit the requirement of the average of the last 10 years. Basically, there's no other major changes. I mentioned briefly our pension fund took quite a hit in December, as everybody has. Before we jump too far with that, there's been somewhat of a recovery in January, and we'll know better at the end of January where we stand in that. But we're diversified enough that we didn't take a gigantic hit, but it was expected based. I mean, everybody's faced the same issue there. Any other questions? Any anything in particular, you're always welcome to call me anytime if you come up with anything.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you, sir.
Is that good?
Number 7, the proposed decommission of the Child Street water treatment plant. Whose idea was this?
Let me ask a question about this, because I received a communication from Liz Cirillo about an item that was on the agenda for the Bristol Town Council to endorse the letter that you sent to the state, which evidently the Barrington Town Council did endorse.
Yes, we did not send it to the state yet. We were waiting for the town council endorsement.
Well, it was sent to the council. I didn't know anything about it. Evidently, the council was under the impression that somebody from the water authority was going to speak to that point. No one was there, so they passed on the item. And the question is, do you want it back on their agenda, and do you plan to go to speak to them about it?
No, we did suggest they put it back on the agenda. Could speak to it. Generally, one of the board members has been doing that.
Well, the board members can't do that if they don't know that you've sent it and it's on the agenda.
In the December report by Alan, was sent out to us on email. It did mention that one of the board members from that town would be at the town meeting should the town council have any questions. Remember I spoke with you about
Yeah,
the meeting
it was in his,
on the 8th or this month, where basically,
Well, I was certainly unaware it was on the agenda. I was unaware of the fact that one of the board members was expected to go to the council meeting and speak to it. So the first I became aware of it was when I heard from Lou saying no one showed up.
Okay.
Should this be put back on the agenda for the next meeting in February? So the left hand and the right hand.
did you not get that?
I read Alan's update. I didn't connect the dots and realize that
I didn't connect the
it was
dots.
going to be on the agenda for X date, and one of us should be there.
Because I went, and I think someone from Barrington went, maybe it was Alan, because
Yeah,
Alan
Alan
was
went.
there.
in the article it said that, so, did you get in touch with the solicitor regarding
Yes,
the resolution letter that they were supposed to send to you?
Warren is doing that.
Okay,
Yeah.
but we don't have it yet.
We don't have it yet.
Okay. Tom?
But Lou did contact us, and we said, yes, we'd be happy if you put it back on the agenda for the February meeting, which is, Sid, do you remember what the date was? It's early February.
I think it's February 8th, and I'm out of town that day.
Okay.
That was the date I'm just looking for his email. I think
No,
that's
that's a Friday.
You told us the
February
6th.
It's a
It's gonna
Wednesday.
be Wednesday would be the 6th.
Did you be able to make it,
And
Mark?
it's,
I can make it, but frankly, and I have no problem speaking to the council about any of this, but I think the FaceTime would be good to have the director at the meeting.
No, that's,
no.
the idea was
I would
basically,
recommend
Oh,
that.
no?
for the board member,
Yeah.
when I appeared before the Warren Town Council, they were confused as to what we were asking for. Once I basically laid out what the letter was about,
Right,
we just wanted their endorsement,
Right.
supporting our efforts.
to seek funding from the state.
Plain and simple.
Right, I understand all that, but my point was that I think the director needs to make contact with town council and have FaceTime with them, so they have some interactions and relationship with her, that's all.
Well, we do. They have tri-town meetings every so often, and
Okay,
we keep them up to,
I have no problem going to the meeting.
we keep
As
them.
far as I know, I have no other meetings.
I don't know what happens in Barrington or in Bristol, but in Warren, Alan's letter
Yeah.
is part of the correspondence.
Right. They do
So
the
if
same.
they have a question, but on this letter dated in December, Sid might have another copy, it
Right.
did
And
say
there was
that.
a meeting sometime in the last year,
Okay.
where we were invited to attend the meeting.
Yeah.
and we
attended.
did.
They didn't invite anybody because they were expecting based on the letter, that someone would be there.
Okay.
So,
Well, I can understand, because that's what the letter said.
okay,
Okay.
so, it just,
Not a problem.
okay.
I really think that the town's representative carries a lot more weight than you realize in the discussions. If Pam went there, it would probably get more technical than overall of what we're trying to ask for. So,
Because we're the ones that are voting.
I agree with Bill, that sometimes it's better just to have
Yeah.
the town's representative from the board.
Yeah, again, I have no problem doing it. I thought it would be a good thing. But if that's not the way it's done, that's not the way it's done.
And actually, the town has appointed a liaison, as the councils have picked up to various committees and so on, and
It's a new council member.
it's a new council member, and he's
Right.
actually coming in
Yeah.
tomorrow to meet with us.
Aaron Lay, was it Aaron Lay?
Aaron Lay,
Yes.
yes.
It was good fun.
Trying to clarification with respect to the process. Alan does his report. Alan himself appears at all the Barrington Town Council meetings, except when he's away, and he asks me to cover for him once. He goes through in detail. When I covered for him, I said, you folks have that report in front of you. If you have any questions, I'll elucidate. Otherwise, you can read. I'm not going to repeat the whole thing. But is that happening in Bristol and Warren or not? That's what I'm-
Yeah.
So much appearing each time? Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, I think it's a no-brainer for them to endorse the letter, but I think they want someone there in case they have any questions.
Okay, we move on to the decommission of the Town Street plan.
Yes, as the board found from the tour we did last month, the treatment plant is no longer functional, and we would like to officially decommission it. We had been maintaining it as much as possible for an emergency supply, but the structure has become so deteriorated that it's no longer safe.
Could we rent it out for a horror show? Makes a good backdrop.
You're going to need a very huge liability policy.
Are you looking for a vote for us to say shut it down?
Yes.
So moved.
Tom? A question on my part. The supporting documentation outlines what is required to keep it operational. What we don't have is what is required, what are the expenditures in shutting it down. I think that was hit on last month.
Right.
But I don't have a clear sense as to, okay, we're going to have to do this. There's hazardous stuff in there, or there's some, I'm assuming, and shouldn't that be part of the process of what we're approving? Maybe
It's
as a budget
actually, the costs are relatively minimal just to do a shutdown. Most of the hazardous chemicals have been removed. It was just keeping a minimal amount for an emergency. They'll have to start disconnecting the electrical, and we do have an electrical licensed electrician on staff, so we'll be doing some of the work in-house. I'm sorry.
Oh,
What you gonna say?
I wasn't going to say it until you finish, but, well, the question really is, then, well, what is the decommissioning? Because I was picturing it demolishing of the plant and removing the pipe, underground piping.
Eventually, we'll be gradually looking at doing the demolition. Right now, we're trying to make it legal, essentially for notification to the Water Resource Board and the Department of Health that there is no longer any, we are no longer using the supply, essentially.
And I don't know what that process is, and that was going to be a question. What is that process to have the Health Department and Water Resources Board?
Essentially sending them a letter, a notification that the treatment plant is no longer in operation, nor will be.
My other question here is, in decommissioning, we're shutting down this facility which was operational, and if it's going to be boarded up, if it's going to be made non-accessible, is this something that you need approvals from a local building inspector viewpoint, or a state building inspector, or somewhere along those lines? I'm worried about this liability that we have, that people are in there on a daily basis right now, and something falls and hurts somebody. Now we have a decommissioned facility. Somebody goes in there for whatever reason, and it's a bigger liability because we didn't secure it enough.
I think that's, if I understand it correctly, I think that's a separate step.
Yeah.
I think what first we have to do is to formally advise the state that we are no longer going to be operating this plant. Then we probably would have, they would have, the staff would have to develop a process to make that safe, as an example. And I know that's your concern, that would be my concern too.
Okay.
Well,
So-
how would we start making that a building that would not have such liability as far as safety concerns?
So can we?
So that's an internal plan, I think.
Okay,
That's,
so but could we add to this as a second part? One, the motion might be to decommission the plan and also to direct the staff to develop a plan on defining the decommissioning and what that would be or something within, 6 months or something like that.
I think basically what we're just doing is notifying everybody, we no longer produce water.
Right, right. That's
Then we'll
what-
take
one
the
step.
steps, then we'll
I'm
take the
worried-
steps to,
Right, I'm worried about a building that's sitting there.
well, then why don't we have that put on the agenda at some time? So we can discuss that and have.
what to do with the old building.
Right, and direct how we should.
If I could, the building itself, structurally, we use it for storage. The decommissioning of it, which we've already started planning internally, disconnection of the electric. We have live piping that runs through there, so it's isolating the valves and shutting those to drain it, so there couldn't be a pipe that fractures and floods. So it will be safe from the standpoint of our employees going in and out using it. The decommissioning side is backing out of the use of it as a water moving facility and shutting those down, which is the same work that they do trying to keep it running. So once in operations, Mike and Brian have already started to look at how that phasing would work, to look at what would go first and the pieces we take offline. So we can, Pam, we can produce that and Pam can pass that on to you if it's a concern. But that's being thought of as we speak, and as soon as we do this, we'll start on that. As soon as people give us the okay.
I have a
See, I think
question.
it's a bigger issue than the building safety, because as I look at this, you have a note in here to us as of January 15th to decommission the plant. Then there's a January 15th letter to the Water Resources Board, which hasn't gone out, is that right?
No, it did go out.
It did go out, okay. But all of this, in my mind, is tied to the state requirement in the legislation for us to have an alternate source of supply. With the decommissioning of the water treatment plant, we do not have that. And to me, it assumes a high degree of urgency to get one of our representatives to introduce legislation removing that requirement, because it's no longer possible for us to meet it.
Well, we don't want to remove that requirement to maintain an alternate supply, because we
Well,
do
from the
want,
shallow reservoirs.
but we don't want it from the Massachusetts supply, correct?
Well, it's impossible for us to do it from Massachusetts with no water treatment plant.
Right.
And I don't see that we have made that argument to the councils or to our representatives. Am I wrong?
Virginia, what are you saying? You're saying that we should go
in the
through
past.
the councils first before we...
No, I'm saying that I think the fact that the water treatment plant is no longer operational is a key ingredient in getting relief from the legislature on what is an impossible requirement.
Well, the legislature also required the Water Resource Board to pay for any improvements.
Right.
Unless they don't allocate any funds. And
Well,
then
and
we
no, it
are-
doesn't say that.
It does.
That is your interpretation,
No,
right?
it does say in the language that if the state does not appropriate the funding, the Bristol County Water Authority is no longer responsible to
Well, and they
maintain
haven't
the system.
appropriated the funds.
And they have not appropriated the funds.
Then, I'm not a lawyer, but I would take the approach that since they have not appropriated the funds and they have not noticed us that they plan to, that we feel that this requirement is null and void. We're pursuing a connection with Pawtucket. But this is, to me, it's a much bigger issue than putting boards on that building and decommissioning it.
Except we're conflating
yes.
like four different issues. Those are all valid issues that have to be pursued, but tonight, you're simply being asked to vote to decommission the plant. Now,
But we haven't been told, what does that mean? Does that mean the
No longer
expenditure
produce water.
of, well, I
It's
understand
very
that,
simple.
but are we spending $50 to put new locks on? Are we spending $500 to board up the windows? What does it mean?
It sounds like from what Ken said, being decommissioned does not mean that we're gonna board up the building, lock the doors, and throw away the keys. They're two separate issues. Am I right, Ken? Okay, so if we can just keep it for now with the decommission.
I have no problem with
Okay.
approving that. I have a problem with the lack of information spelling out what that means. I think what it means is we're no longer gonna test it once a month. We're still gonna use it for storage and other ancillary means, right? Needs.
For now, until we
Decide what to
Till
do
we
with it.
have enough funds to take it the next step. We did not have funds allocated in this next year or two for demoing the treatment.
And that's fine, Pam. I'm just saying that to me, this memo would be much better if it had 3 or 4 more sentences. This means we are no longer going to test the plant once a month, but we're going to continue to use it for storage. And it will be properly safeguarded, or whatever language you want.
I see what you're saying, Gene. I guess the word decommission could give some examples of exactly what's going to, what the process is.
Strip the equipment out and sell the building, or, you know, it could mean different things to different people.
Any other discussion? George? Sorry.
Does the town have to do some type of inspection on the property that's being decommissioned?
No. We're just stopping producing water. That's all we're doing. Has nothing to do with the building or anything else. We're just stopping producing water.
But if I had a commercial building and I was gonna demo that building, I would need a demo permit.
If we get to that point.
Doesn't say
If
demo.
we get to that point, we're not even participating.
No,
We're totally off topic here now. We can talk about this the rest of this one topic for the rest of the evening. I think we have a motion and a second on the floor. Is that true?
You got a motion.
We have a
It
second.
wasn't seconded. It wasn't seconded.
No.
I second it.
Well, there must have been a second because we had a discussion about it.
Well, not really.
Well, we did. We didn't have one.
It wasn't seconded.
We've been into discussion before we had the
Okay.
second.
Yeah.
Any further discussion on this particular topic? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Professional engineering insurance, number 2.
You need insurance in order for somebody to be able to sign.
Exactly.
I move to approve.
And actually, Mark has an update on the insurance required.
I'll give an update, and this recently came up, I think when we met with the Infrastructure Bank, that any of the designs we do in-house that go through Infrastructure Bank that are approved by DOA, GPA, or whatever, require a PE stamp. Okay, we looked at this years ago, and it was very expensive. But we're in a unique situation in that municipalities generally tie that in with all their professional insurance as a municipality. But as far as work we do, where our PEs will do work and will stamp the project, we are our own customer. Okay, so we would design something for ourselves. So I met with the insurance agent. I haven't had time to go over with PM today, but they're working hard to kind of work with the underwriters to look at us a little differently. In that, basically, if there was a flaw in a design, and we are our own customer, we don't sell our services out for other things. We would, if there was a flaw in a design or whatever, we would be looking to sue ourselves, which is a unique situation for the underwriter. And they've suggested, I told them we need to move on this pretty fast, but they're looking that maybe we can put a rider on our current policy that protects the board members, that will also include the professional services of our engineers to protect that. They think they may be able to move that way to include our PEs as well as our board members for liability under our insurance policy. But we have to, as an authority, the PEs can't go out and get their own insurance. We have to get a policy that covers the authority.
We read all that, and my motion was to approve it. And I think management has the ability to do it at the lowest possible cost.
Right, they're working, I told them we need to move sooner than later on this, because we have some plans for the spring to get going, so they said they'd get back to me quickly to see what they can get. If they can get an underwriter to understand our situation is different than a firm that may be, like some of the firms we use, like PAR or whoever, that do firms for other people, but we are our only customer of the designs we do. So we probably will have an update. I'm sure I'm sure there's some paperwork we'll need to do to present, but I'm hoping within the next 30, 45 days to have something firm that we can move ahead with that.
But keep in mind, we may be our own customer, but these are public facilities and public lands that we work on. And so that we might not be the only ones suing ourselves. There may be somebody who's harmed by work that we did in a street or affected somebody's home.
It's not a cheap insurance.
I'm surprised that the agency doesn't have it already.
They're looking at it to do the best for us, the cheapest thing that would be able to suffice for us.
But doing the design in-house saves money.
Saves money.
Any other discussion or questions?
We'll have an update on that
Okay.
in the probably next month.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Number 9, proposed purchase of new vehicle, backhoe and a dump truck.
As I mentioned, we've had this in the budget for a few years. We've been very dependent on a contractor to do the backhoe work for us. We determined a number of years ago we could do it probably much cheaper and more economically and much more efficiently than having a full-time contractor doing the work, where we have to pay him every time we need something done, even if it's a minor project. So we've had it in the capital budget. We finally decided to pull the plug on it because we're down to one contractor only that will bid that can fulfill the needs of our contract, which means he has to be able to respond within 1 hour on a water main break. And he's been the only bidder for the last couple of years, so he's free to bid whatever he likes. And if he decides not to bid, we're in a very problematic situation. So we found a used backhoe in excellent condition, so we'd like to purchase that. And also off of a state contract, the purchase of a dump truck. Mike gives a very good explanation in here of what we're looking at and why. And, do you have any questions?
I move approval of the 2 recommendations.
Second.
Go ahead, George.
I'd just like to ask, what's the difference in price between the used backhoe and a new backhoe?
Approximately, that price, probably 50,000
More, 50,000
for the
more?
new one. 50,000 more.
It's about half.
It's about half. This is it's a very good condition for the year. Minimal use. It's over in western Massachusetts. Unfortunately, the way the economy has been, there's not a lot of good used equipment around because a lot of the contractors have not been really healthy business and not buying equipment and turning it over. So we've been looking for about 6 months to 8 months for a piece that's reasonable. So that's the backhoe. The dump truck would be new, as Pam said, under the state bid. It mirrors what the town of Warren has, that same model on order, and I think the town of Bristol has 2 or 3. So it's a Mack truck with a power plant. So it would offer some, in an emergency situation if somebody has a spare alternator or whatnot. So it's not a bad thing to have the same vehicle as we're finding in the municipalities. So we're coming to a relationship where we help each other out a little bit better. than was done in the
Pretty much
past.
what the state's buying too, isn't it?
Excuse me?
Pretty much what the state's buying too.
Yeah, it's on their MFPA, their standard package.
Okay. Anything else? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Approved. Number 10, task order, engineering services to remove underground storage tank at Nate Road Treatment Plant.
Actually, on this one, we spoke with the engineer on this. We found that there is a contractor on the state MPA list, so we won't need to develop bid documents. So at this point, we still need to look at what else needs to be done. We need to look at the MPA and get some cost estimates from them. So I'd like to suggest that, don't know what the final numbers would be, but perhaps do an up to a $20,000 allotment, but trying to figure out how much we can actually do ourselves on this by doing the state MPA
Why
procurement.
not just up to 25,000 just to cover yourselves in case you're coming down here?
That would be fine, and obviously we would only do what we absolutely need to do.
Okay, so this amount of 24,280,
As requested.
make it 25,000 even? Do we have a motion on the floor for that?
So moved.
Second? Second. Okay, any discussion?
Is that maybe I missed it, but is that a not to exceed amount?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Not to exceed $25,000. Okay. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Let's see. Number 11, task order, engineering services to develop required dam emergency response plans.
Yes, this was just passed by the state of Massachusetts. We got a Happy New Year. You are required to provide engineering services, well, I'm sorry, but dam emergency plans for all 3 of our dams that are in Massachusetts. And we don't have any options.
Can we remove those dams?
We are investigating removal of them. They will take, well, look how long it's taken just to investigate the Kickabuit.
I know you're.
But we are investigating.
I know you're investigating it. My question is a practical one.
Can we?
If you demolish that dam tomorrow, does it create damage downstream?
Which dam? This one up here?
Any of the 3?
Any of the 3. No, yes, we would have problems with the Swansea because there's been developments put in below the stream, and we do have to do some, probably create some concrete embankments along the stream. There is some property owners on the Swansea Reservoir that also would have a say. So we did start investigations on that. We did do a report at one point, and the board at that time decided not to go any further with it.
From my standpoint, we ought to get out from under that as quickly and as cheaply as possible on all 3 of them. It's only going to get more expensive and more difficult.
And the Shad Factory actually Save the Bay would be very supportive. We've talked to them about that. They would like to see that opened up. We have a fish ladder there, but it is not very workable. And the pond has gotten inundated with invasive species. They tried removing at one point, and it just came back in spades. So they would love to see that opened up. So they would actually help us. And the state of Massachusetts, and for something like that one, it has been supportive. The Swansea Dam, we may have more issues with.
Well, but Swansea has made that situation much more difficult by having development downstream that's impacted. So they have really impaired our rights, as I see it.
We protested that. That was before my time, but we strongly protested and fought that development, and it went forward anyway. So essentially, they consider we have no rights.
Why don't we just deed it to them?
if they would take it, that would be
I mean, I think the
fantastic.
time has come to play hardball. Because the more we are ordered to investigate and do studies, the more money we have sunk into it, and there's nothing of value for us in it.
The problem is we do own it, and we are responsible for it. Joe, if you want to look into any legal options we may have, I would
Could we
be happy
donate
to
it to
do
the
that.
Audubon Society?
Do we pay taxes? on
Nobody
it?
wants a dam.
We pay taxes on it?
We do, I believe we
Well,
do.
just don't pay the tax and they'll take it back.
I like
Put it up for
About that
sale.
before they, I don't think they'll take it.
Put it
No.
up for auction.
What
This is a problem the states run into with maintenance of dams, and they are starting to take legal actions with owners because a lot of dams have been let go over the years. This one, unfortunately, was built in the very I think it's the mid-1800s, so it's a very old dam. It does not meet any of the structural requirements any longer, so the state could require us to replace it. So that's why we did start looking into actually breaching the dam. And it's got some issues though. And it's going to be more expensive and take a bit longer, but we had been working with the town of Swansea to have them take over the reservoir because they were having issues with water supply. Unfortunately, they're now going to be buying water from Fall River. Yes. Or Somerset, from Fall River initially.
After all that money they spend on
that
desal.
So that was one hope we had at the time, that they would take over the reservoir. It's not looking very positive anymore. So we will be investing more time and more money in looking at removing that dam.
So you need a motion for,
And this is for the dam emergency plans.
okay, Swansea Dam, one of $5,500, and the Shad Factory and Anawan dams for a separate total of $13,000 even, bringing it to $18,500.
What if we did not abide by this order?
Ask Joe.
An enforcement action taken against you.
Do you
What was
think
that,
they'll bother?
Oh, gosh.
So, kind of, yeah.
Okay.
Dam safety is a big issue.
Dam safety's, I mean, the state of Rhode Island had gone around to, I think, every dam in the state and issued notices of violations against them, so.
Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Okay, number 12, change order engineering design of phase 1 of the protected pipe.
This is some additional changes to the initial proposal, the RFP that was issued for the design services for the Pawtucket pipeline. We had a previous survey done through another engineering firm that we had made part of the proposal. It turns out that survey was not adequate, so the engineer, Beta, had to go out for another contract with another survey team for additional funding as described. We also ended up having to produce a number of designs for East Providence for their approval. So that had actually increased the cost as well.
I understand that having to do the redesigns at East Providence's request increased the cost. I don't understand what the problem was with the initial surveys.
They didn't have the specific tie lines that this Beta needed to be able to do the subsurface surveys.
So that sounds like a specification lack.
No, it wasn't, it was provided, we had a survey that was done, and it was provided in the proposal. But the survey was not adequate to the degree that the engineer needed to be able to do a full survey beneath the ground. He actually ended up finding some of the survey points and the borings were in the wrong locations that he needed for his design. That they actually ended up with some of the borings being done in areas where a sewer main had been put in, and so the soils were very good in those locations, whereas actually where the main is going to go is a lot of ledge, and it would have not been workable.
Are you talking about an engineering survey which shows, how many feet, or are you talking about something that surveyed the subsoil conditions?
It was actually both.
Was the survey done originally with the idea that it was going to satisfy the Beta requirements, and then Beta said it didn't satisfy those requirements?
No, it was done originally with the firm that thought they were going to do the water main project. So they did it for the design information for it was a preliminary design for the installation of the water main. We didn't feel that some of the information that they provided was adequate. But we're not experts on the survey issues, and once Beta got into looking at the data and being able to correlate it with where they wanted to put the water main, it was not sufficient.
And so who did the remedial survey work?
That was CDM.
So would we have been money ahead if we had hired CDM from the beginning to do the survey work?
Oh, I'm sorry. It was CDM did the initial work.
Who did the subsequent work?
Beta's doing the subsequent work, and they contracted out the survey work.
So would we be money ahead if we had had a contract with Beta that provided that they had to do the engineering work, survey work, as part of the project, as opposed to having contractor number one do it and contractor number two sort of saying it wasn't adequate? And it sounds as if they were right, it wasn't adequate.
Yes and no. At the time, CDM had done all the work on the studies for both East Providence and Bristol County Water, so they did all of the preliminary work, and then we hired them to do a preliminary work on the layout of the pipeline, and it was just a follow-up to the previous work that they had done. So we had actually taken that information and provided it in the proposal for the engineer to do the final design, and we awarded Beta the final design work. But when they went to use the information that was provided, they found it wasn't
inaccurate, right?
And somewhat inaccurate.
Okay. So what I'm asking really here is, what can we learn from this experience so we don't repeat what sounds like a mistake in the future?
Yeah, I don't think in this case there was any indication that there would have been an issue. CDM's a very reputable firm. We could only go on their expertise as to what they were providing.
But at some level you were not comfortable with them doing the project and switched horses to go with Beta, am I right?
Yes and no. We did put out the proposal. CDM did not bid on the proposal to do the final work.
Okay, I'm not going to beat the dead horse, but in my world, I smell something that doesn't sound good to me.
I have a question. On the first page of Beta information, it says that on November 21st, 2017, the contract was $322,000 and $679. $322,679. And on the second page, it said the new contract sum, including this change order, and it's got the same number. No, I'm sorry, it doesn't.
No.
It's just, no, I'm sorry, that's right. It is
377.
So what's the increase, to 55,000?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So we're improving an increase for 55,109 $91.
That's correct.
For from the original contract of $322,679.30.
That's correct.
Okay. Next one.
Any other further discussion on this topic? So,
Actually, we think you need $1 more, but I'm not gonna worry about it.
the motion on the floor is to approve the change order in the amount of $55,191 to Beta Group, correct?
Correct.
For a total, you want to include the total.
For a total of $377,870. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, another change order. Change order engineering services for the Child Street main replacement.
And this is just a change order on the engineering services. The original estimate was it was going to take 15 days. It actually ended up taking 30 days. The engineer got a lot more involved than they thought they were because of some of the issues, the pipe breaking when they were pulling it through, and the additional inspection services for the time. So we're recommending the change order to the engineering services for $12,312, but it's within the overall projected cost that included a contingency, so it doesn't represent an additional project cost.
You mentioned there that said it would be a charge back to the contractor.
And yes, we are also charging back the contractor for the extra time that our staff spent on site for the, when the pipe broke.
Yeah, so it'll be this cost of $12,312.
This is just for the engineer,
Right,
yes.
but that will be charged back to the
Not
contractor.
this amount, no.
Not this amount? Oh, okay.
I'm not charging for the time I was there.
They already deducted the amount that they had to, the excess amount that they did for the break, the pipe break. But there was some excess time because they had to go around the boulder. They found 20 feet down. They had to, it took them 2 more days just to do that, and then there were some issues with some of the tie-ins that they did at the end of the project.
I'll move that be approved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Number 14, the pipeline customer letter.
This is a letter, as I mentioned, was developed a couple of years ago. Just taking another look at it and seeing if the board had any comments. Should this be something we send out now? Kind of, especially now that we're doing the first phase of the project.
I think we desperately need to send something out to our customers, but I don't think this letter is it. And I'm sufficiently concerned about our lack of effective public relations that after tonight's meeting, I'm not going to vote in favor of spending any money until we come up with a public relations plan for dealing with this. And I would maybe start with having somebody rewrite this to be 1 page with some FAQs attached, because I think it's hard to follow and it's not punchy. You know, we hire lawyers, we hire engineers, we hire all sorts of consultants, but we seem to think that we can do this ourselves, and from what I've seen, I don't think we can.
Actually, this one was reviewed by a PR firm. we restructured it and changed some of the information. We just want to make it short and sweet. Actually, what we've been discussing in-house is also either sending a, like you say, a one-page, maybe with a fact list, to customers with every bill, but doing a different topic each time, rather than try to put out a lot of information in one packet, is to maybe send it with the bills. I know a lot of people throw out the information, but if we had a little letter, each one giving an update on what we're doing, as you said, maybe we get a PR firm to make it a little more interesting. I think it would reach more people in that way.
I think it's a good approach. I personally don't think that you're going to have customers who are going to read a 2.5-page letter and including a picture that is unintelligible.
I think, short is the better way to go.
Okay. So we just put this on hold for other discussion next month, or?
Sure. We'll come up with a plan for build stuff or something is the best way to go.
Okay. Number 15, 2018, Bristol County Water Authority Rules and Regulations Update. Page 4.
Yes, the board had looked at this last year and had approved it, pending some comments. Gina had some, and staff had a few. Meanwhile, Joe's also reviewed it and has had some comments, and staff has taken some further reviews and added a few more. So we would like to offer it again for approval for 2019.
I had read it more intelligently now than when I first saw it when I was brand new. And I have a number of simply little mistake type corrections, which I don't need to know that we all need to occupy ourselves with. And the only one that really jumped out in terms of some really substance, but it's in the very beginning, the first full paragraph. These rules and regulations pertain to the uniform practices of the Bristol County Water Authority that requires the installation of services. What does services mean? Because we go on to say meters, water mains, and other services. And we've got the word used twice, meaning different things, and I think that needs to be, and that's one where I could not fix it myself, just in terms of a word.
Water services.
It's referring to.
Is it a service line? It
Water
needs something
service
to.
lines.
Okay.
Versus other services, yes.
And I think the others I could give to whoever the appropriate person is, just to fix a little.
Yeah, if you could send them to me, that would
Okay,
be
fine.
good. Thank you.
I had a comment on page 4. The paragraph just above where it says water rate structure says any complaint against any employee to the authority shall be made at the office of the authority and preferably in writing. And I would think, I'm just thinking that maybe that's something that should go to the attention of the executive director as opposed to someone just dropping a letter off at the girl at the reception desk or something. Could we put something in there that's a little more specific as who it's going to be addressed to? I had another question on page 8.
So can I, just to stop, so how about if it read, just so that we can approve these tonight? How about if it read, any complaint against any employee of the authority should be made at the office of the authority and preferably in writing addressed to the executive director?
Yeah, that's correct.
Very good.
What page, Joe? That was page 4.
Yes, page 4.
No,
Page
that-
4. Oh, my next.
Yeah.
I had a question on the payment under page 8. So the last sentence says payments except by cash.
Yes, we need to cross that out.
Yeah, okay. So what does that mean? You can't?
It was my understanding at one point we weren't taking cash payments, but we do. That was my mistake.
So that, scratch that except by cash out,
Yes.
is that right?
Yes.
Here, let me see. I don't think I had anything else.
Anything else?
I read this quickly myself, so.
Well, actually, a question where it's not simply the word, on page 11, section 2.9, maintenance of large water meters which are defined as being larger than 2 inches. Is that the water meter itself is 2 inches?
Yes,
Okay.
it's the connection.
Right.
It's called a 2-inch meter.
Now, I know this is what Bristol County does, but with regard to responsibility for water charges, you allow either the property owner or the renter, when permitted by the property owner, to be a customer. That doesn't pose problems for the authority in trying to recover. So why do we allow it? I don't. Does anybody else allow a? No.
We had an uproar about that one.
We had a public hearing that we were changing
It's
it.
the property owner's responsibility.
It is legally,
Yeah.
by law.
And if you can't get the money from the property owner, then you have.
But since it was a change, we had a public hearing and we had it in an auditorium. We filled the
Yeah, I think I
auditorium.
was there. And it makes no sense to allow a tenant who's going to disappear, especially in a college town. You know,
It doesn't.
everybody leaves and
They're actually our
somebody's
most
stuck
difficult
holding that bill
customers.
and the property owner goes, that wasn't my responsibility.
Have we ever
But
pursued?
actually, we are developing a program. We found a couple other utilities in the country, not in the area, that do this, but they require the owner to sign a letter that allows us to bill the tenant, but he understands he's ultimately responsible.
That would be good. Should put that in there.
Is that something that we're going to be doing
Yes.
March 1st?
Well, we haven't finalized that
Okay.
yet, but that would be, we want the board to vote on that as a change in policy. But we will have that on the agenda for next month.
So that'll just go out to every property owner with multiple units?
Well,
or rental?
The idea is as people change over, we would require it. I don't think you can require the existing ones.
How do you even bill a two-family home with 1 meter?
No, they have to have separate meters.
Oh, you put it,
Yeah, they would have to have individual meters where, or the tenant,
Whose
you know,
expenses
encompass the
meter?
whole,
whose expenses per meter?
the owner, the
Right.
property owner. It's just the bill for water use that can go to a tenant. The property owner is responsible for everything else.
Well, that's a separate issue from the rules and regulations we're asking you, I think, unless there's a specific.
Okay.
Oh. Our esteemed council just opened the door. If we look at 1.3 for a second, and if you take out, 8, if you take out BCWA rules allow, with the approval, and insert something like, with the approval of the Bristol County Water Authority, the property owner or the renter were permitted by the owner. As opposed to saying it allows that, we put in with our approval. With BCWA's approval, either the property owner or the renter
Is that
can be a customer.
1-2?
1-3.
It does, it says upon approval of application for service.
Well, then the rules don't allow it necessarily.
BCWA rules allow either the property owner or the renter, when permitted by the property owner, to be a customer and to open and maintain account upon approval of application for
Right, but
service.
that's a statement that the rules are allowing it. What I'm saying
They
is,
do allow it.
where does it allow it? Right there, what you
What I
read.
just read.
Yeah, I know, and what I'm saying is change that to make it with the approval of the BCWA, the owner or the renter or the property owner may be a customer.
And we already allowed the renter, this is going back to that issue, we had a public hearing about this.
Right.
So we do allow the renter to be billed.
But
Then you have to change, then you have to have a new public hearing.
Okay.
So if you want to, if you at the next meeting,
you
we
want to
have,
have a public hearing on this?
no, not in the rules and regulations.
Okay, this is beyond my thinking, okay. Don't want to take the time.
Anything else before we,
I'm not sure what could be here.
We can talk about it.
Yeah.
anything else on these changes okay, or you want to continue? Okay. Has there been a motion to approve? Yeah, we have a motion and a second. That's why we have led to this discussion.
Motion to approve with the changes we just discussed and
Certain clerical.
fixing grammatical and clerical.
Okay. So that's a new motion, I
That's the
think,
motion. That should be the motion.
That is the motion, I think.
Okay, that is the motion. Okay, is there a second?
Bill, Joe can't make the motion.
No, I'm sorry. Okay. No, well, no.
I'll second.
I'm only going by Gina saying that is the motion, so I was using her as the voice of reason. Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Number 16, fiscal year 2019 strategic plan update.
I move that we do what is recommended in the memo, move it to the February meeting.
Brilliant. Table it.
I got a little typo.
Here are typos and there are questions, and
I think it's a big issue.
If we're going to move this, you want to,
Joe, can the board members send me any questions
Yep.
they might have?
Yep.
So I can
Absolutely.
maybe address them before the
is
next
this
one.
in Word or PowerPoint?
It's in Word.
Could you send me an electronic copy and I'll send you my suggested changes electronically?
Okay.
okay. Joe, you have
Yeah,
Ray, you have a,
it's just mine, I could point it out to Sid and.
okay.
Don't even mind it.
Okay.
Nothing major.
All right. So we'll put this on next month's agenda. Okay, number 17. Need a motion to go into executive
Well,
session?
before you do, I can likewise contribute to the brevity of the meeting by saying I don't have anything really of any substance for North Farm, and I don't know that we need anything for investment in public funds.
We do have an update,
We do.
yes.
Okay. So why don't we just do that then?
That's the only item in executive session?
With the minutes.
Yeah, and minutes.
And then
We'll take 30 seconds.
Right, okay. Do I need to mention that we're going to add the executive
No.
minutes? Okay. All right then, so it's just going to be the investment of public funds, purchase of property, go into executive session. Is there a motion? Someone,
To go into executive session.
second?
Second.
All those in favor, please raise your hand.
Hi.
When we come out, just now, we're going to take no action
no action.
except to
Seal the minutes.
vote to seal the minutes. Okay. We are now back in open session. I need a motion to seal the minutes of the executive session.
So moved.
There's a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.